3-day forum on masculinity, where we're really looking at improving outcomes for young men and for masculine identified youth in Tucson. I'm excited, tonight we're going to talk about masculinity and trauma, and specifically we're going to talk about trauma-informed approaches to doing gender justice work. And I think we're going to do some really just rich, powerful stuff together. If you haven't had a chance here, we ask folks to give an introduction in the chat box. So your name, your pronouns, and I encourage folks to share, why are you here? Why are you logging into this call tonight? What brings you into this place? And that'll be helpful as we get going. So feel free to put that in the chat box. So we do have some really just beautiful speakers and panelists here that are going to share with us. We're going to do some reflection on a pretty powerful documentary that hopefully those of you that wanted to screen it beforehand had a chance to. And if you didn't, that's okay. But so before we kind of jump into everything, I do just sort of want to give a little bit of context for this 3-day forum tonight. And each day, folks are attending what they can. There's a lot going on. My kids are running around in the background trying to go to bed. So we all are doing what we can to be together under these kind of new conditions. But so I just want to make sure I kind of give the context of kind of how we got here and what we're doing here tonight and over these next 3 days. And each day, as I'm saying, we'll dive a little bit deeper into that context and what we're doing here. But, there have been a ton of folks here in Southern Arizona for a long time doing great work to try to show up for young men and for masculine identified youth through mentorship initiatives, through initiatives to work in community, to build support systems, to work through systems. There's been a ton of good work going on, a lot of leadership. Despite that fact, we know that boys in Southern Arizona, young men, are still at, way increased risks for depression, for suicide, for addiction. We know that there's a massive achievement gap in terms of what's happening in schools. We know that all of this has an intersection and an interface with the juvenile justice system. We know that there is a ton in terms of support systems for young folks in general, but also in particular for young men, that just is not adequate still at this point. And so in that realization, there's also been a group of us for the last several years who have really been working specifically around the issue of how do we raise boys to be boys? How do we raise boys to become men? And how does that socialization process, where we teach them a man means these things and a man never means these other things, how does that process impact all of these other systems that they're going through to either intensify harm or to create really meaningful opportunities for intervention and for alternatives that really nurture their well-being? And so if that's too abstract, I just mean when we raise one group of the population and tell them, when you ask people for help, you're a failure of a human being. You never ask people for help. When we raise certain folks like that from the time that they're little, that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on them, and it interacts with other types of stress and can create a really toxic scenario that feels hopeless. And so that's some of the stuff we talk about. When we raise one group and say, hey, real men don't cry. Why are you crying? Why are you crying? Are you a girl? Why are you crying? When we do that kind of thing to little tiny children repeatedly, then it means something when they're going through critical developmental years of adolescence to try to be emotionally whole and express their feelings and ask for help. So I'm getting into it a little bit, but I'm just trying to tell you these are kind of the issues we've been looking at, and how do these issues come together to structure a climate in which an exceptional number of young men don't have what they need to make it. And how do we as adults in Tucson say, we're going to do better? We've decided we're going to do a lot better. So that's that big picture context. So what happened was this summer, we had the opportunity through Boys to Men and some other community partners to hire a group at the University of Arizona to do a ton of research, specifically right here in Tucson, on what is going on with teenage boys and masculine identified youth today, what's available, what's going really well, what are the opportunities, what's not going well at all, where are the huge gaps, where are we all the way letting them down. And a big part of this forum is going to be to pour through that information. In a lot of ways, it's the foundation of what we're doing here tonight. And at the end of this, by the time we get to Wednesday afternoon, to say, what do we for real want to do about it? What do we for real want to do about it? What would it be like if we said, we're going to absolutely do something about it and hold me accountable to it? We're going to do better, and we're going to create the community and the infrastructure that we need and that our young people deserve. And we're going to make it accessible to all of the young folks. And in this particular instance, young men and masculine identified and youth in Tucson, and really see where we're at through a long-term sustained collaboration. That's what we're going to explore together. So I know that's a whole lot of things I'm giving you. It's just some big context. So we're going to take plenty of time in this event tonight. We're scheduled to go till 8:30. We're going to take plenty of time for questions towards the end. So if you're able to hang on to them, great. If it's pressing, feel free to hit it in the chat box. Belen, Sarah, and Frank, maybe I can wave. They're moderators on here, and they're gonna help if you need assistance with anything. Please do keep yourself muted. If you need to step out, take care of yourself. And like I said, when we get to the end of this, we'll talk about what's going on over the next couple of days. But for now, I just want to make time for us to jump right into it. So we have three amazing panelists here with us tonight. Ashanti Branch, who is the founder and ED of the Ever Forward Club, and his work is featured in the Mask You Live In. Ashanti was with us for a conversation in June. Ana Harper-Guerrero, who is Vice President of Strategy at the Emerge Center Against Domestic Abuse, and just a whole general, all-around bad human being, in the good way, like a bad human being. Like, don't mess with Ana. She's great. She's a powerhouse. And then Chucho Ruiz, who is with CPLC and a bunch of initiatives, but I really like the Barrio Intellectual. I like that one, Chucho, that I've seen in your bio. So we'll go with that. And so I'm gonna let you all introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you're doing here. And so I'm gonna ask y'all to do it the way that we do things in Boys to Men. So at Boys to Men, we run circles between boys and men, talking circles. And the way that we start every meeting together is we check in. And so, I'm going to ask you, introduce yourself, say two feelings that you can feel inside of your body right now, two emotions that are going on for you. And if you're willing, just answer that question. Why are you here tonight? What brings you here? What is it that has you showing up for this? Because I know y'all are all three really busy folks with a lot of things going on. And so just share with folks what it is that makes you show up for this conversation. And then you can say, I'm in, that's what we do. And then you can pass it to one of your other panelists. And so I'll start and pass it to you, Ashanti, if you don't mind.
Okay, I thought you were going to check in. Hello. Greetings, everyone. I'm Ashanti Branch. Right now I'm feeling excited about what's about to happen, and I'm always feeling a little bit of nervousness, to do a good job and to show up in a really meaningful way, an authentic way. And why am I here? Anytime I see a community, a city, some leaders who are really supporting the work of young men, I want to be in. However they want me to be a part, however it makes sense to be a part. I don't force my way in, but this work is meaningful. This is not work for me. This is what I believe I was put on the earth for, and this is what I believe I went through all those challenges growing up for. So that when I talk about this stuff, I'm not talking about it from a book or from research. I'm talking about it from experience and a heart for helping our young men to not have to go through some things I went through if they don't choose to. And so with that, I'm in, and I'll pass it to Ana.
Good evening, everyone. Ana Harper-Guerrero. Um, I would say Ashanti took my 2 words. I don't know if that happens much in circle, Michael, but I feel like feelings about it. I'm excited. I'm excited to be here for sure, and I'll replace nervous, which I absolutely am, with I'll use the word humbled. That I would be invited to speak in this space. And I'm hopeful that I can offer something meaningful. Let's see, the reason that I'm here. I mean, I think, I've been an advocate in the community and supported many, many survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence. I've watched their children struggle through that process. I've seen women who have died in that process. And so when I think about what it requires of a community to truly build safety and for people to not have that experience in their life, this conversation means everything. I think that the stakes are really high. And unless we confront these issues, we're going to continue to spin our wheels. And so I'm willing to show up for any conversation, any time of the day or night, any place, if it means that we're going to build a collective effort to shift that. And then I think, I have a 7-year-old little boy on top of that. And so I always think about him, and I think about, my quest to save his little heart for as long as I can make that happen. Because I know that eventually he's going to go out into our community, and he's going to be confronted with all of the things. And I need him to hold on to his heart. If we're going to break cycles that exist in my own family, that exist in our community, he's got to hold on to his heart. And so I'm just grateful to be here, and I appreciate everybody who signed in on a Sunday night.
Right on. Thank you, Anna.
Sorry, I didn't follow the rules. Chucho, it's your turn.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Ashanti. Let me see. I am also feeling a little nervous. I'm a little humbled, and I'm feeling a lot of hope. Definitely, I did one of the things I do best, and I procrastinated in watching the film. So I watched the film right up until I had to jump on here, and it gave me a lot of hope. It gave me a lot of hope because I know that maybe for a lot of us on here, that's the way that we've been approaching, a lot of this work, and to see that folks are willing to take that on, it just gave me a lot of hope. So I'm definitely feeling really hopeful. And then also to see all these faces and see all these names and everybody that signed up on a Sunday evening, that gives me a lot of hope too, because in my experience is that I feel that the young men that I've been fortunate enough, and this is part of the reason why I'm here, but I've been blessed and fortunate to work with youth for some time now, and in my experience is that as soon as they find out that there is someone that they could rely on, they're going to reach out, and they're going to reach out every time. And so for me, like seeing that there's all these folks in Tucson that are willing to show up to this conversation, it just gives me hope, right? That it matters enough to all of you all to be here tonight. So yeah, I'm just feeling grateful too for that. So I'm in.
Right on. And it's just, my heart is so full just listening to y'all. And I just want to share, I'm coming off of Boys to Men. We do a thing that's called a Challenge Adventure Weekend. And so I just went up the mountain with 7 boys and 10 men, and to be COVID responsible and to fit with the CDC guidelines, be safe. We all slept totally outdoors, no tents, right on the ground, like social distance, roughed it hard. But that's what we did this weekend, and I just got back. But my heart is so full because I spent 48 hours, no cell phones, no TVs, and just sitting with young men around a campfire and up on a mountain and just listening to their stories. And exactly what Chucho said, you know, it's like that. You're telling me there's somebody listening. Yeah, I am ready to talk. And it was really powerful. So I feel all of that hope and energy that we're all bringing, all of that good intention that we're all bringing to this meeting tonight. It is a Sunday night, and there's a lot going on in our communities. There's a lot going on this month, you know, but this good intention that binds us together on this call on a Sunday night, it's powerful, and it's connected to what we need and what we want. So I'm really grateful for it. If you'll see, I've shared my screen here for some poll questions. I read folks who have introduced themselves in the chat and talked about why they're here. It's so powerful. So thank you for those of you who have done it. If you haven't done it and want to do it, please still go ahead and do that. And then I want you can go to this link, and I'll put it in the chat box, or you can use your phone and text it. So it's Calm Window. And we're just going to do a few poll questions about the film before we get started here. And I think, you know, so I guess I want to say, right, technology is a little bit tricky. I know some folks had a hard time getting onto the film. You might not have been able to do it. I had a little bit of trouble my own self. So if you didn't see it, it's not, you know, catastrophic. Nothing's hanging on it. If you're like, hey, Michael, you promised me I could see a movie and I didn't get to see it, what are you going to do about it? I'll come up with something. We'll work it out. I'll find a way to help you see it. But if you didn't see it, don't sweat about it. So let me put this in the chat, and then we'll go ahead and do the questions here. Y'all hang with me. All right. So the first question that I'm going to bring up so this is for folks who did see the movie. I want you to share what feelings did the film bring up for you? For those of you who did see the movie, using that link I've put in there, or you can text it directly. And let me put that in the chat too, in case you missed it. So you can text Calm Window 300 to the number 22333 to text in. Okay, I see results are starting to come in. So let me put this in here in case anyone's missing it. But you can text in, or you can use that link that I sent. And as we're starting to get responses, so what feelings did this documentary bring up for you? What feelings did this documentary bring up for you? And we'll just take a few minutes here, and then I'll go on to a second question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's such a beautiful opportunity, and it's hard, and it's all the things, to just really take a moment through a documentary like this and just look at the everyday that so much folks are going through. And a lot of us might know it. We see it. I resonate with what Chucho said, to like see on a big screen people that are trying to come at it in the right kind of way. When that feels sometimes like it's hard to get folks to see that perspective, it's really powerful. Right on. Okay. So I'm gonna change this over here to the next question, and I just want the panelists to have a chance to see this also, because I think it's going to be helpful for them. Okay, so the second question here is, what was what was your major takeaway? What was your major takeaway? Take a few moments here, and you can text that in. You can use the window. What was your major takeaway? Right on. Right on. I love it. I love it. What else? Take another minute here just to let folks who wanna share a major takeaway, go ahead and submit that, and we'll share all of this with you too after the fact. So this won't be the only chance you have to take a look at and just see what folks wanted to share. Anybody else? Anything else that folks want to share? Cool. So those will keep coming in, and I'm happy to share this as we go. But I just wanted, you know, and we needed to do it in an efficient way there, but I wanted to take a moment just so that we're all kind of, you know, in the place of understanding what each other went through and watching that documentary. And I see some of y'all are putting it in the chat too, and that's great. That's totally good too. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn to our first question for the panelists. Y'all had a chance to kind of see what other folks thought. Y'all just watched it. So the first thing, and I'll pass it to you, Anna, and maybe we can just go Anna, Ashanti, Chucho, and we can take that order. And you take as much time as you want, as little time as you want. I'm just wondering what stood out to you. What was a major impact? What was something that you were taking away from it? What do you want to lift up from what you watched from the documentary? Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, I saw one of the takeaways that someone entered being a comment about accountability that gives folks the room to grow. And that's actually the thing that came up for me as I was watching the documentary, is just how confused we are about what accountability really is, and that, like, at its root, it is love. I don't think that it's intended to be punishment. And particularly when we're talking about young people, children who have been hurt, who have been traumatized. I really, was really wrestling with what led us to a place of believing that hurt children, hurt young people need accountability as defined by punishment. That's a really interesting thing for us to struggle with. And I think that there are probably many historical roots about why we define accountability in that way. But I mean, the point is, there isn't much to say if you were able to watch the documentary. You can clearly see that when love is provided, when love is on the other side, people will walk through. And that's true for adults, that's true for children, young people. I mean, I've seen it, in my own life and in my own work. It's a lot harder. It takes a lot more energy to punish and shame people than it does to provide love. And I think that, the idea that you can't hold someone accountable or help them to see where, they might be making choices that are leading them in a particular direction, that can be done with love. And I also don't believe that we need to extract more punishment onto people. I think that there are many natural consequences in life. And I think that in the documentary, we could clearly see where, you know, life and the struggles of their parents had handed them a healthy dose of consequences in their life. And I don't think that they needed more from anyone else around them, but what they needed was love, to be able to see that there is another side, there is another way, and hold steady with that love to allow them the opportunity to make a choice in that. I think about accountability in that way. And that's what I was processing through as I was watching. I was really curious about, you know, like, none of those young people and none of the young people in our community that are struggling need more consequences in their life. They really need love, and they need the pathway forward. So that's what I'll lead with. And I'll let Ashanti take it from here.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I appreciate that. You know, one of the things that I've seen the documentary before, and as I watched a few clips this time, one of the things that just stood out to me was the adults asking lots of questions. And I think that what oftentimes happens in work where we're supporting young people is the adults who are brilliant and smart and talented talk a lot. And we talk sometimes so much that we think we know what the kids are thinking because we spoke for them, as opposed to asking them the questions and listening. I think we should be using our mouth and our ears in the ratio that we have them. We should probably listen twice as much as we talk. I think that what we saw was a lot of young people being able, even though they didn't have the words, the idea that they were included in their own recovery. I think that if we ever expect to save, help, rescue anyone, they have to be a part of their own recovery. They have to be a part of their own rescue. It's naive of us to believe that because we tell them the right steps to fix their challenges, that the challenges are now solved, right? I think that we need to begin asking young people more questions, to sometimes find at the roots. The work we were talking about in Ever Forward, we talk about the masks, right? We talk about what are the things that are happening that behind the mask. Now, I'm not talking about these personal protection masks that we're wearing right now all around the world. I'm talking about the masks of emotional disconnection, where we smile when we're not really wanting to smile. We could be smiling when there's really nothing to smile about. When we laugh at things that are not really funny, when we ignore deeply seated trauma and historical things in our lives and in our community lives that we don't get support on. So I am, what I saw, and what the things that still stands out to me is we need to include more young people in this work. I think every nonprofit should have a young person. If they work with youth, they should have a young person on their board or at least on their staff, right? Like I'm not saying that's easy to do, but I think it's important to do. I know that there's somebody may be thinking, oh, but how are you going to hire them? How are you going to child law, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Like, fix the problem. The problem is that we got too many adults trying to do the work. And so I can go forever, but I want to say that we got to include our young people in the rescue of our young people, because they're the experts. The way the world looks today looks very different than it when I was a teenager. Although I think I ask a lot of questions and I learn a lot, but there's still a lot more to learn. So thank you, Anna, for passing it to me. And Chucho, you're up, brother.
Thank you. I think one of the things that kind of stood out for me that I really appreciated was, I think it was Gordon, I think it was one of the teachers, when he was having that conversation through that text conversation with one of the young men, I believe it was Steven, and then reflecting on it afterwards, he was kind of, saying Steven called the next day and apologized. One of the things that Gordon said was like not being able to take those things personally, right? Where like if someone is hurting and someone has like an outburst, right, and they're directing that hurt towards someone else, like just being able to understand that, right, and then not take that personally. But I think that has a lot to do also with because I feel there's a power imbalance that's already existing, right, between adults and youth, right? So one, being able to sit with that, but then also like not using that to just abuse that power as a result of like taking things personally or not doing our own work to be able to heal ourselves, right? Because of whatever hurt that we're carrying and how we could project that, right, with like the youth that we're working with. So that's kind of like what I got out of that scene there, and which I just kind of, that's the one that's really coming up for me. So yeah, just like the work that we have to continue to do for ourselves.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I appreciate what everybody is lifting up, and I'll give a plug too. On Wednesday morning, we're gonna do a panel of just some young men, just some young folks sharing, and it will be a great opportunity to do some listening, and some learning, and to like follow leadership, you know, and to break our ideas, exactly right, what Ashanti's saying of who we think knows, you know, the assumption that we have sometimes, that I have sometimes. So I'm going to ask a second question, but I want to say too to our panelists as we go here, you know, you want to respond to each other, you want to hang on for a while. You know, somebody once gave me the advice, you never answer the question a teacher asks you, you answer the question you think they should have asked you. And I failed some tests because I really took it to heart. So maybe don't everybody do that, but you can think about how you want to do it. But I mean, you know, talk to each other. Let's talk about it. Take this where you want to, okay? So the next question I wanted to ask, and y'all are kind of already getting into it, but I'm wondering if you can talk about where you see it in particular in your work and in your life. So right, a lot of the ways that the movie frames the impact of trauma is about adolescent development. And what does a traumatized child look like during these critical adolescent development period, during these years? So it reframes disciplinary issues as the inevitable result of kids who are growing up with insecure attachments with the adults that mean the most to them. Really terrifying circumstances. And what does it mean to live with so much that is painful, uncertain, hurtful, sad, you know, and to not have safe places, and then to show up at school. And so I'm just wondering if you'd be willing to talk about how you've seen that relationship play out in your own work. And what I mean in particular is, how does trauma show up in the lives of young people, but it's oftentimes misunderstood? You want to take that, Anna? And I'm just going to keep passing it to you, Anna. If you want to pass and come back on any of them, take more time, you can pass it.
Sure. I think, you know, the thing that immediately comes up for me when I think about this question is all of the young people that come into shelter with their parent, who are fleeing homes where abuse and violence is happening. And I think that things that we typically see are reenactments of that violence toward their siblings, toward other children in shelter, toward their parent, typically their mother. And in fact, I don't know if anyone saw the news this evening, but there was an article that came out about a 14-year-old here locally who killed his mother. So I see that story, and I think about, you know, like, what broke inside of him? How did he get there? And I watched the children at our shelter who are equal parts. Let me say this too, and I think this was also clear in the documentary, that they're equal parts that which they have witnessed and experienced that is harmful and hurtful, but also they are still fully capable of love and have full hearts. I think that that's really important to say, because that's the hope. That's to say their humanity is still there. Certainly they're working on burying it deep inside of them to avoid feeling continuously hurt by the world that they're living in. But what I saw loud and clear in the documentary, and what I see in the children that come into our shelter, is that their hearts are so wounded and also very open very open and longing for love. And so I think, you know, our staff often build really significant attachments with the children who are living at the shelter because that's their home. And in many ways, we build family with them. And then I think about their parents. And and I don't, Michael, I don't know if this is the direction you were wanting to go with this, but I think I have this question about, you know, at what point, at what age do we stop accounting for the harm and the context in a young person's life and blaming them for it, i.e., being able to justify our use of punishment for their behavior, right? Because often for really young kids, we'll, you know, feel bad, feel sorry, want to get them help, understand that what they most need is love. But by the time they're 13, 14 years old and on juvenile probation for whatever they did, we're all about what a bad kid that is, and constantly looking for ways to punish, as opposed to reconnecting them to their heart and their humanity. And I would take that a step further. I was thinking about, Michael and I used to do a training for child protective workers in the state. And, you know, there's always this really intense struggle to understand how parents can abandon their children. And I mean that figuratively and literally, right? And how we, you know, often label that as poor parenting, bad people, they need help, sometimes they need to be arrested. We have a whole framework that we use to understand poor parenting in our culture. That is not helpful to families, mind you, right? I've never seen that approach or framework actually help a family re-engage and reconnect and rebuild their life. But that's the framework that we use. And I think that the thing I've said in that space with the workers is, you have all the children that y'all are all worried about, right? The life of a child protective worker is to worry about the impact of abuse on children. And those children grow up to be the parents of the next generation of children in so many cases. When we don't help and work to heal that harm and that pain that happened when they were children, they grow up and have children who are embedded in that same framework. And that's sort of those cycles and how they play out. And that, you know, ties into how we victim blame adults, survivors, for the things that they've experienced. But at some point we begin doing that to children too. We give ourselves permission to blame them for the things that resulted in what's manifesting, whether that's behavior, emotions, etc. And I think that that's a really important to make here a point to make here in this conversation, that we don't question that. We don't question our thinking around that because it works for us as a way to just like deal with a problem, as opposed to really holding in front of us, how is it that so many families in our community are suffering in the ways that they are suffering? It can't just be that there's something wrong with those people and those families. There must be something about the conditions in our community that create the space for so many people to have those experiences. So that's what I think about big picture and how that ties directly to my work. Ashanti.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. You know, that's a very deep question, and I think a lot of things that Anna spoke about I resonate with. You know, I don't work with young people in a shelter, but I work with them in a circle, and sometimes they come to the circle and they're going through pain, they're emotional pain, and here's the biggest thing that we see in our work is that most of the times you can't see it on the outside. Like if I'm good at keeping you away from me and I don't want you up in my business, then I'm gonna put on whatever I need to put on. Either it's a smile. It's like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Or it's like enough of a grimace that you won't get close to me. Or if you're a teacher and you're trying to care too much, I may even like yell at you to push you away because you're getting a little too close. I see it show up in so many different ways. And the problem is we sometimes think of it because we want to look for it in a certain way. Like a kid who may be with their hood down, head down. The kid may be a star athlete. The kid may be a 4.0 student. But if they are good at masking what they're going through, we miss it. We see it all happen all the time. We see kids, a senior year of high school, oh my God, something tragic happened. We're like, oh my God. But no one knew that that kid was dealing with X, Y, Z because no one ever asked. If you're doing good academically, you're doing fairly decent socially, no one asks you, everything okay with you? They expect you to keep doing better. A B+ ain't enough. You need an A+. You got accepted to 4 colleges? What are you talking about? That kid over got accepted to 20 colleges. What's wrong with you? We push even the kids who are doing well to not ever be able to show that they're not doing well. I want to show you a quick video. It's like 3 minutes. And I'll let this young man tell you what is going on and how we see it sometimes.
I was always angry, but I never really, like I never expressed it. I just balled everything in because like it's not necessarily has to do with masculinity, but it's like I never had no one like I could trust. I didn't have no one to go to, and I'm definitely not gonna, go to therapy and talk to someone I don't even know, because it's like no matter what, I felt like I'm gonna just go talk to this person for an hour and still have to go right back home to my mom drinking all night and walking home after work, stumbling in the house. Like, what is me talking to somebody gonna do? And so I bottled everything in, and I did that till I was like pretty much a year ago. I remember I went back to school and it was like, everybody knew at the school I was in the hospital for, depression and stuff like that. And it was like, oh, I play basketball, I'm supposed to be this big popular dude. And it's like, I go back to school and people are looking at me like, oh, he's just in the hospital for whatever, like, and you realize like, not everybody's your friend. Everybody you hang with every day, that's not your homie. That's not the person you could talk to, that's gonna be there for you. A lot of people just looked at me and was just like, judged me, basically. Even though they don't know what goes on in my life, I never told them, so they don't really know whatever went on in my life. I think it's just like, the importance of the story is like, I never had any of this. I didn't have a group like this to talk to. I didn't have nothing. I went home and just dealt with whatever was going on in life and tried to move past it. And like I said, after that, after years and years and years of doing that, you're gonna break down. Like, you can't just keep doing that. Like, you will break down and it will just progressively make things worse. So I think everyone in here should really like understand the importance of this group, whether you think it's stupid or you think you're shy or you're just weird to be here because like it's just a weird situation. I understand, but it's very important that you find people in your life that are truly there for you. And everybody else in here has been through stuff or is going through stuff, and like, you're not alone. And it's not soft to express your feelings. It doesn't make you less of a man to express your weaknesses, and fighting those weaknesses and learning to be able to deal with them in a healthy manner. That's what actually makes you so-called a man and makes you strong. It was nice meeting all you guys. I think you guys should really understand that this opportunity that you guys had today is a very big one, and y'all should be grateful to have this opportunity. And hopefully what I said resonates with some of you guys.
So I just want to say that's one young man who went through this experience of these masks and learning that he wasn't alone. And that's what he shared with the other young men in the room. So I think we just need to ask them. That's what I think. So that's how it shows up in our work and ever forward. Chucho, thank you, brother. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that too. That was a nice video. I think, yeah, I'm thinking about mostly in the schools that I work in, the ways that it shows up is how the schools could be, they could be a sanctuary, they could be a safe place for like the youth. And at the same time, those schools and those institutions could be a place where they continue to, experience a lot of harm, and a lot of violence. So I feel like there's youngsters that show up every day. They'll show up every day, but they're not producing the things that the schools want them to produce. They're not behaving, right? Quote unquote, behaving the way that the school wants them to behave. But they're there. They're there for a reason. Maybe they're there because they're connecting with their homies, their peers. They're connecting with an adult there. They're connecting, and they're seeing it as a sense of a place that provides some type of structure for them, right? And then, but then, and then they'll put up with whatever type of that, just that top dot bottom experience that they continue to have within those systems. And then you have some youth that don't show up to school at all, right? I know that truancy kept coming up in the documentary, and that's something with a lot of the schools where I'm at. There's like attendance. It's like this huge issue, right? And so that could be, it's like I'm not willing to like show up to this place that ain't showing me any love at all whatsoever. So like, why am I gonna go there, right? It could be that there's people that don't really care about me there, don't really don't look like me, don't speak like me, don't have any clue about where I come from and who I am. And then there's like a combination of that, right? What does it mean if somebody doesn't want to be home and if somebody doesn't want to be at school? And what we see happens a lot is that a lot of the youth are self-medicating, right? Figuring out like I need to take care of myself. And a lot of them I feel are so brilliant, so aware of those conditions that I think that, that Anna spoke to, right? Those circumstances that are very real. Because I think about that a lot too, in terms of when does that shift happen, right? From seeing them as our babies, as our children, and I feel like we also know that like for young men of color, it happens a lot sooner because of like the systems that are saying like, oh yeah, that's a young man, and they're 12, 13 years old. They could be, these are Black children, brown children, indigenous children, babies, and they're being referred to as men already. And so it's a lot of all those things happening, right? So yeah, that's just, I feel like all those things come up, and it's a matter of how you could like make those connections and build a sense of relationship with them, right? Where they're gonna want to go there to school for that sense of structure, but then also why is it that they have to put up with all these other things, right? So yeah, so that's just kind of a little, just a little bit of what I see, right? And then unfortunately, a lot of it is like what we don't see unless you're in the community, right? Because if they ain't showing up to school, I know in my case, you're gonna run into them at Food City, you're gonna run into them at a super or at the park or at the swap meet, and that's so important that they're able to see somebody again that, you know, that they know that has like their best interest like in their community too. So yeah, so I'll share that.
Anna or Ashanti, do y'all want to share anything else on this before I'm about to ask another question?
And one of the things that that I just want to reflect on what Chucho was talking about students not wanting to show up to school or not wanting or not feeling seen. And I think that one of the things that, you know, whenever Forward first started, I was a first year teacher. I thought I was doing a bad job. And when I brought those young people to lunch, I told them, I said, look, I'll buy you lunch once a week. In exchange for lunch, I want you to teach me how to be a better teacher. Like, I knew they were smart. I could see it in them. And I think that one of the things that I've experienced in my work is that we need to be supporting teachers to be more available emotionally for students. Now, you get some teachers who will say, I'm not here to be their friend. I'm here to teach them math. But if the emotional connection is what's going to create the ability to learn, then that's part of your job. And I think that oftentimes I tell teachers, look, if you care more about the subject that you teach than the subjects who you're teaching, then there's going to be a disconnect. And I know students in my teaching life, I taught for 10 years, public school, private school, charter school, high school, middle school. I've seen students that if I don't show up to work one day, they're going to make up their own homework. And I got students that if I deliver the homework to their house, they're not doing the homework. So from the range of students from all those ranges of kids that are all individually unique and different, you got to be ready for whatever it is. It is more than just a subject that you teach. And I think that is what we need. So I say that to say, I knew that when I saw students show up and when I began to ask students, like, what obstacles have you overcome? Like, tell me, I thought I was going to get math answers. Like, tell me the obstacles you overcome and what obstacles you're currently facing. Not one student out of 140 plus students, not one of them said, I can't multiply, I can't divide, I can't do fractions. They all were like drama, family, drugs, gangs, relationships. Not one of them said math. I'm a math teacher. I thought I was gonna get at least one math tip. None of them said I'm struggling with math. It was all the stuff in front of it. So if they don't want to be at school, and that's where they spend most of their time, and now where are we learning? We're learning in this little rectangle right here, right? Now I've crafted for you a very nice rectangle. I know I got these plants. These are real plants. Like I got paintings. Like, but what if I can't craft for you a scenario that I can accept you seeing? What if what's happening in my house is not even acceptable for you to see? So therefore I get marked absent or I don't show up at all. Or what if I can't turn my microphone on because what's happening in this room is so much chaos that I don't trust that it's gonna not embarrass me. I mean, our kids are struggling in so many ways more now. And so I'll stop there. But thank you, Chucho, for mentioning that, because if we don't get them into a safe place of learning, then it puts them further behind on the scale towards graduation. Not for the sake of graduating, but so that they can then become successful adults. And so, or at least have access to more things as successful adults. I don't think that it's exclusive, but thank you.
Anna, did you have anything before I jump into this next question?
No, go for it. I think I can tie some pieces into the next question.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Well, and you know, this next question, I think too, I think about what you said actually, Anna, when you said, you know, at what point do we start to see this little person so differently, as in need of nothing but TLC versus in need of punishment? He needs discipline. You know, he needs to understand. And the thing I think about when I hear you talking about that, right, is that shift that happens anyways. You know, when my son who's 4, and I can accept a full range of behaviors from him, and then at a certain point where it is that, like, why are you crying? I need you to begin to act like a boy, a man. When we begin to put that gendered pressure on them, and it interacts with all this other stuff that we're already talking about. I'm thinking of Bell Hooks, the advocate and author. You know, she says that what's at stake in the ways that we socialize children to become boys is an issue of child abuse in the United States today. And that might sound extreme to you, but what she's saying is when we take one part of the population and we humiliate them systematically for their feelings and core acceptable components, inescapable components of being. And we teach them shame, rage. You know, we just did, and Anna, I think you were present, we just did a training with the Interfraternity Council. And we asked these guys, what did your dad teach you growing up? How did you learn to feel about your emotions? And they said, I would get mad at myself when I cried. I didn't get mad at my dad. I got mad at myself because I knew how much I had failed this person. What's wrong with me? You know, so that's the thing I want to bring into this conversation. How does this socialization process, and as I give it over to you, Anna, I'll share a screen with the man box, which is just kind of a graphic. They use it at a call to men in a lot of places that helps us understand what are the, you know, some of the unhealthy codes that are often unspoken, implicit, that we enforce on one another in subtle ways, maybe unconsciously. And how does that way that we're raising boys, one, traumatize them, and two, set them up to traumatize? How does that process of the socialization of boys fit in with this bigger conversation we're having about trauma? And I'll pass it to you, Anna.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of connections to make here. You know, when I think about my observation of many men, whether they're, you know, fathers or just sort of an adult man in a young boy's life, my observation is often that their interactions with that young boy or young man are really rooted in really subtle kinds of examples of what's here in this box. And by that I mean, you know, rarely do men walk up and hug and kiss and say, hey, I love you, I haven't seen you in a while, right? Like, that's really rare to observe. But you can see almost like a really light banter that plays out that looks like, right? Like, it looks like, oh, like they're having a good time, they're laughing and joking. But what they're saying to each other are really, really sort of subtle ways of dehumanizing. So it's like calling names, it's, you know, ridiculing, it's belittling, and jokes, right, that are funny. Like, that's just like the normal way that I observe masculinity, like, to be socialized. And in that, right, we're really subtly kind of embedding a hierarchy, right? Superiority and inferiority, these structures that teach us about how to teach other people, and status and power and what those things mean in a bigger way. And so then, and in some ways, right, men or boys who are really close and actually probably really love each other treat each other that way. But that's also what I see happen in relationships where there's some competition for status or power happening too. It's like an actual, I'm gonna demean you and dehumanize you so that you know you are not better than me. Because two masculine identities can't exist in one place without one of them being better or tougher than the other. And so what I see in that is a conflating of love and like cariños, right? Like I love you, that's why I'm ridiculing you and terrorizing you, mixed in with I don't love you and I'm gonna destroy what's left of your humanity and self-esteem so that you know your place in the world. And I think that that's a really, really dangerous, traumatic way to teach a human being how to relate to another human being. So you take that experience and then you directly connect it to what we see play out in domestic abuse. It's the ridicule, the demeaning, the dehumanization of a person's partner. There's superiority and inferiority. Someone has status, the other person doesn't. Who gets to call the shots? All those power structures that we're all very concerned about when it comes to domestic abuse, we insidiously feed to our children as a framework to learn how to interact with each other. And I just think that we have to really think critically about what's funny and what are demonstrations of love in our community. And I'll take it a step further, you know, and I should have said too early on that, you know, nothing I say when I talk about child protective workers or other systems, that's not to, you know, be hurtful to the people that do those jobs, but I'm talking about systems and the way that systems are harmful and indoctrinate people into how they're to do their work and give them the framework and rules for that. So I think about this experience I had a number of years ago. And this is, so you have this happening on an individual level, in families, in friendships, where this really curious way of socializing and to conflate love and harm to be the same thing, right? So that we're so confused, we can't separate the two. Then I think about systems and how systems respond. And this experience I had a number of years ago with someone who works in an after-school program that services youth who live on the south side of Tucson, many of whom are youth of color. And they were, we had just finished a workshop where we were talking about racism, and the intersection with violence. And they were really concerned about that piece of our conversation, and gave me an example of a young person who said, who was, I think they were Black, who said to them, I wish I could be white. I wish I could be white. And their response was, well, you can. You can be like a white man. Here's how you do it. And I thought it's probably one of the most problematic things I've ever heard come out of someone's mouth who's been entrusted to care for young people. So when I think about this idea of socialization and the messages that we give to young boys and men in our community, it's absolutely about how we teach the socialization process, but it's also about how we who are involved in systems and who have roles where we have the ability to influence these young folks reinforce really harmful, problematic messages about who they are at their core, that again get conflated with love and harm coexisting, right? Rather than telling that young Black boy, you don't need to be white because you're glorious the way you are. Let's talk about what's in your heart and what your strengths are and what you have to give to this community. The answer wasn't that. The answer wasn't you're okay who you are. It was strive and reach to be somebody else, something that's not achievable, in fact. So then what happens to that young man in the long run, and what happens to his self-esteem and how he thinks about himself when he can't get there, something he was never intended to be. So I think about all of those intersections of socialization process and how we reinforce them in systems. And often we want to blame like families and fathers and individual men, and that's absolutely a piece of it. But I just think we as systems and institutions reinforce those messages also. So Ashanti.
Oh, I don't remember the question anymore, but I'm gonna tell you what I do feel right now. Thank you, Anna. So look, we're talking about training these adults. I'm really big on professional development, and I'm gonna talk about a little bit about that really quick. So what I've seen in most of our educational systems is that there is almost no money, but oftentimes very little money for professional development. So we expect our teachers to get better and learn how to ask better questions and learn how to be culturally competent when they're talking to our young people. And yet we don't put money in the budgets. Now, I'm talking to principals, I'm talking about administrators. They don't put money for professional development, but we expect teachers to get better. Teachers are blamed for why schools are failing, but we don't put money in to train them outside of what they should already know because they're teaching a certain subject. That has to change. Schools are the only systems, well, I'm gonna say maybe there's one more. Schools are the only system that looks like it did 100 years ago and we expect it to work. What other system looked like it did 100 years ago and we expect it to have a massive success? It's not gonna do, it's pretty impossible. So I'll say that first. I mean, I'm gonna jump to the other thing because Anna got me all fired up. So here's what I do see, here's what I did see with young people that we work with. If the adult in the room does not have enough understanding of how to deal with situations, kids get kicked out when it doesn't need to be a kick out situation. One example. I'm running a circle of young men. We do check-ins. We check in every week. One young man every week. I'm good. We check in on a 1 to 10. He's a 10 every week. This young man over here, you know, he's a more talkative young man. He lost his father a couple of years ago. He's dealing with a lot of stuff. But this one day in particular, young man 10 over here is like, I effing hate my father. A young man over here who lost his father 2 years ago is like enraged. Like, how dare you talk about your father like that? I wish I could have my father. Now, I see what's going on, but to the untrained eye, to think that, oh, you got a kid want to fight this kid, you could be like, kid, get out. He is hearing, I hate fathers. Therefore, his emotions that are overloaded about his own sadness, about his own father, is now projecting on this young man who hasn't spoken in 6 months. After 6 months, he finally said, I hate my father. Like, I'm thankful that he finally opened his mouth then saying I'm a 10, because he wasn't a 10 all those weeks. But my job in the circle is to hold space. I can't tell their business. And what I had to do in that moment is say, wait, stop. You're thinking about your father. I know you love your father. You miss your father. But your father is not his father. Let him speak. And what happens with a lot of adults and even young people, their emotions get heightened. They begin to banter at each other. They don't let each other speak. And the ones who are the louder ones, usually the ones get all the attention. And the ones who are the quieter ones are the ones that say, okay, well, I'm never saying nothing again. I never. And if you're not able as a person who's supporting the young people around their development and growth, teach them emotional well-being, intelligence, how to listen, how to think, how to hold space for each other, then we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep making jokes about each other because it's the fun thing to do and it seems cool. But when people get hurt, we don't even notice it. And so I just want to say that young man finally talked about what his father had done to him, about the trauma that he was going through, about being hungry at night, about what he was going through. And that young man said, man, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you're going through that. And he went over and gave him a hug. You know, but it's about creating a space where I cannot agree with you, but I don't jump down your throat because I want you to think like I think. That's what we need to do for not only our young men, but as you can see around our world, we need to do it for some of these adults who don't seem to be able to handle opinion that doesn't match theirs in a healthy way, at least. So I'll stop. Thank you, Chucho. Thank you, Anna. And Chucho, you're up, brother.
I'll keep it short with this one because I feel like Ashanti and Anna are just they've spoken to so much of it. But it's kind of brought up some of the things that I was thinking in relation to just that collective socialization, right? That man box. I think there's a lot of rules in there, right? Of like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. And what, boyhood, manhood is supposed to look like. And so I think just that it reinforces that, right? Like our society has feminized, compassion, love, understanding, those types of things. And it's like really just stripping us of our humanity. And I seen it in the initial poll, right, about the film of how we need human connection. And that socialization is like stripping us of that potential to be like full human beings. So I feel like that's happening, right? And then so limited emotional intelligence and the inability of asking for help. So those things are happening as a result of that socialization for sure. And the other thing that Anna reminded me of and Ashanti reminded me of is there was this piece in the film where the principal is talking about the relationship between Gustavo and Kelsey, right? And they're seeing all these patterns show up, and that's like toxic and the principal. And then again, this isn't to judge him, right? It's the systems, because I mean, I have so much love and admiration for the work that he did. But one of the things he said, and he stated it briefly, and he was like, that's not our responsibility, right? And I think right after that, he said, but then we did this, right? So they're putting in the work, but the message, the standard, and probably rooted in policy is that that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to make sure they graduate and get good grades and pass the tests and all that shit. And so But I think once you're in a place where you're going to show up for them, right, for another human being, it's like, you know what you have to do. You know that you have to, you know, show up in all these other different ways for what you see playing out right in front of you. But I think sometimes because those policies is like, I got to follow the rules, and the rule says I'm not supposed to do these things, right? So I think going back to what Anna was saying about the systems, right? And then you have us in there working in these systems that, yeah, are just trying to figure those things out, right? The best ways that we can.
Right on. Thank y'all. There's so much good stuff here, you know, and I just want to lift up, man, how much to hear y'all speak from your heart with the wisdom and experience you have of showing up for folks. You know, the trauma-informed approach, like this is it. This is what I'm hearing, man. It's just like bottling up some of what y'all are sharing. And I saw, you know, it was a comment we had in the chat box, which is how do we take what went on in that one school and how do we scale that through our systems? And so I want to lift up just a few things here because I want to be mindful of the time. We're going to be back here bright and early tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, might be early for some of us. And I want to make sure I get folks out on time. So I'm going to put together a few threads of thoughts, and then I'm going to give it over to the panelists to just share what you want to. We'll make a little bit of time for questions, and then we'll make a little bit of time to talk about what's going on for the rest of this week. You know, so one thing I want to point out too, something about that ACEs framework, right? So adverse childhood experiences and how, right, when kids that have the high score on the ACEs test, we know it's going to correlate to all of these other, you know, negative health outcomes for themselves, for the whole community. One thing that is missing from that ACEs framework that somebody pointed out to me recently really critically is, you know, it's really individualized, isn't it? And there's not much going on there for collective trauma, is there? For the traumatization of systems. You know, so I've seen the development of an additional framework. So there's adverse childhood experience, but there's also adverse community experiences. So what is it like to be systematically targeted, disenfranchised, disempowered because of structural white supremacy, for example, as one example. And so I think that's a part of it. You know, the thing I want to share, this is another graphic from the organization A Call to Men, and they partner with Anna and Emerge and do a lot of good work here in Tucson. But is this little box called, this little graphic called the cycle of consequences. And you can see here up at the top, there's the man box, and it's where we're starting out. Okay, I'm coming up, I'm getting all these rules. For the men in my life to love me and respect me, I have to do certain kinds of things. And maybe when I'm young, some of those things turn my stomach, but I love so much getting loved and lifted up and respected and praised and laughed at by other men. I need their respect so much that it's cool, it's working for me. And as I'm doing it, right, I'm working my way around. And what I know is I can't ask for help. Don't be vulnerable. Don't be real about your feelings. The last time I tried that, I was humiliated. You know, I'm never going to do that again. Don't ask for help, right? And we know that leads to a lack of achievement. You know, people that do well, people that do exceptional, of course, we all need help, right? That's normal. But if there's not some sort of intervention there, then we'll just go on. And so, right, I'm struggling in my achievement, still not asking for help, feeling down about myself. You know what? I'm stupid. You know, that's what Chucho said, right? These kids, these boys go to school and they do all kinds of beautiful things. They're hilarious, for starters, right? But they're not doing one specific output that people want. One really do this one output and we'll give you value and we'll judge you and we'll hammer you for not being able to give us this output we want. And so then they're internalizing it. Dang, I am stupid. I am no good at this. You know what? I'm not going to bother. So don't ask for help. So stagnation, right? Exactly what Chucho's saying. Why am I going to school? You know, why I can't be at home. And we know that in this is the key point for trauma to enter, you know, if it's not going on already, is in that stagnation, low self-worth, low self-esteem, can't ask for help. That's where acting out is, you know, and acting out in its truest sense is a term for folks who have had language removed. And so they act out, right? I will show you through my actions and my body, my internal state. That's what acting out is about, because I don't have language, but I can do these other things. We know from there, right, there's the involvement with the criminal justice system, which reinforces a lot of this stuff, which we're going to get into over the next couple of days. And so it's a cycle, right, that just feeds into each other. So the thing I want to think about, you know, we've been talking about trauma-informed care. You know, we've been talking round about it. Some key elements of trauma-informed care are safety, really tending to the person's sense of safety, and it's not incidental. They're having a choice, collaboration, trustworthiness. Do they feel like they can trust the folks they're working with? It's not just like, oh, they'll learn eventually. No, they need to right now. And empowerment. And those are the conditions for when we talk about trauma-informed care. And you know, Ashanti shared that amazing video. You know, many of us work with these young men, and we know how hard it can be. Exactly, right? 6 months of not more than one word. And are you willing to keep showing up every week with the energy, intention, and enthusiasm? And so that's where the trauma-informed care for how do we show up for this population is a lot of what we're going to look at over the next couple of days. The question I want to kick back to the panelists for our last round here. I know I gave you a lot there, right? But Paper Tigers is a story about how one school transformed its approach to support all traumatized youth. So how do you think that the systems in our communities right here in Southern Arizona or in your own communities can improve the ways that they interact with young men in particular to reduce their traumatization and support trauma recovery? And what are the stakes for that? So how can the systems do better in the ways that they're interacting with young men around their trauma and trauma recovery? And what are the stakes of how we're handling that? I'll kick it to you, Anna, if that's okay.
Sure. I'm gonna kind of take a risk here and scandalize this discussion a little bit, but it's okay because we're on Zoom, so there's a little bit of some distance for me. But I really think that we got to stop using the words evidence-based practice. I think that not because those things don't work, don't value, not because of, but because I think that it invites us away from our own humanity. And when I think about what builds safety, what builds collaboration, what builds trust, it is bringing my humanity to the table. It is my willingness to give of myself. And I think that so often we're taught that you have to have boundaries, i.e., create distance between yourself and this person that you are trying to support. And last time I checked, distance did not help anyone feel closer to me, nor did it invite them to talk to me about the things that hurt their soul. So when I think about like the stakes, what's at stake are the very lives of our children. That's what's at stake. So I think for me, and this is something I felt really validated when I was watching the documentary, because I had this conversation with Michael many years ago, and we were struggling through a conversation about men's work and how to be in that work. And I said to him, you got to let your heart break, man. If you can't let your heart break and sit in those feelings, how will you ever accompany someone else in that process? And I was thinking about that in the documentary, about like so often it's about creating enough safety and space for someone to feel their own feelings. Because in that, there's so much information about healing and liberation and the way forward. But in order to get there, you got to let your heart break. So I just like, I don't see an evidence-based model that teaches you how to let your heart break and how to sit in the humanity of another person. And that's why I say that, of like, I have a real struggle with that, because I think that like that's the art form of how to be with folks. And that's really different from a curriculum or a policy or something like that. And I think that there are so many good people in our school systems and in programs who desperately want to give that to people, and they will get in trouble for having poor boundaries. And I, you know, there's balance in everything. But when we're talking about the very lives of our children, like, you know, there isn't anything that I wouldn't do to help someone find their way different in the world. So I was thinking about, and then I'll end with this. Chucho and I did some work at a local high school where we were sitting with coaches who really like deeply care about the athletes they work with, and essentially struggling with them about this question, because they care deeply about the hearts of the young men they're working with, and they were trying to figure out how to do that dance with them. And one of them very pointedly said to us, I understand what you're saying, and it's true, because it hurt my feelings when I was called the B word and the P word and the F word and all these things. And I gotta tell you, though, it works. Show me another way to do it, and I guess I can stop. But unless you show me another way, like, that's all I know that works, and I don't know another way. I'm a grown-ass man who has this job accompanying athletes in a high school, many of whom are from homes where violence and abuse is happening, and I love them, and I don't know another way but to call them names so they know that I love them and want them to do well. Go ahead, Ashanti.
Man, you know, okay. So I want to pass it to Chucho because this question is about local, and I want to make sure Chucho gets to talk about local. And I just want to say that I put this in the chat room. I said that hard work is hard work, and so I'll leave it right there. Chucho, I'm gonna let you go, brother, because I want to make sure you can speak to the local needs you all have right now in Tucson.
I'm just feeling, just thank you so much, Anna, for all your words and your heart always. And I think what you're saying too is, and I think for a lot of it is, yes, and I just really love that you said that this whole evidence-based best practice, it's never sat well with me. And I feel, because it's like, because we could ask, it's like, how's that working for you? Right? It's like, that's the best practice. How's that working? And I think for me, I think it's like to stop reinforcing the binary, right? Like this idea has to be this way, or that way, and there's like no in between. And I think it speaks to like that art form that you're speaking of, Anna. Like there's so many different ways, and then and when we consider like our backgrounds, right? Like there's, you know, how is that best practice relevant to culture, right? And race and ethnicity and income and all those things, our own identities, and there really isn't, right? And I feel like, just thinking about that fluidity, but I feel there's this fear about not knowing, right, or being able to do it one way, and not being messy, right? So I'm just thinking about that, and because one of the things is, I'm going back to that idea of like, it needs to look this way. So like for boys and men, it needs to look a certain way, right? It needs to fit into that box. And I'm looking right now. I'm gonna call or call the attention to Joey and Celeste, right? They have the dancing in the streets in South Tucson, and you got young men there, young boys that are doing ballet, right? And our world would say it's not supposed to look like that. They're not supposed to be doing that, right? And then you got young brown and black boys doing that. And it's such a beautiful, profound thing that is completely accessible to our community, right? So we need more examples, We need more examples, and we need to support efforts like that in our community, right? Like show up for each other, because that's revolutionary what's happening there. And so I just want to, talking about locally, right? That's in the barrio libre. We're really proud to have, efforts like that in our community. So I just wanted to say that, and just thank you. I'm feeling even more humbled. Thank you, Ana, so much, and Ashanti, for y'all's work.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ana.
Right on. So to try to be mindful of time, we have to do a ton of things real fast. So I'm gonna ask if you had questions. So that's the good news. We got days here, so we can drag it on in. If you got questions, I'm gonna ask you to put them in the chat. I'm also gonna ask folks, check out in the chat. What are you taking away? What are you taking away from this? And as you guys are checking out, I'm gonna pass it to our panelists and ask you guys to check out the way we checked in. So right, who am I? 2 emotions that are in your body right now, and what you're taking away from this, to our panelists. And when y'all are done, we'll kick it over to Belen real quick and Sarah, who are going to talk to us about what we're doing over here in these next few days. I know we're just probably going to be a few minutes over, so if you have to run. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and check out here in the next few minutes. You want to go ahead, Ana?
Sure. Probably nervous and still certain at the same time, if those things can coexist. And what I'm taking away from this is that we are definitely on the right path, and that we need to keep pushing. And every time you push against deeply ingrained systems, you'll be invited to return to the way that it was. And so our work is to resist that. As my good friend Richard Elias would say, he would say to resist. And I think that we need to keep pushing the outline here of our work. So I'm grateful to everybody, and to Chucho and Ashanti for your words and being here.
Thank you, Ana. I'm checking out with a lot of joy and a lot of hope. And I leave with this, is that I'm thankful to be connected to this community here in Tucson. Thankful for the hard work you all are doing to serve men and boys. And there's a quote that says, the longest distance that most people travel is the 18 inches between their head and their heart. And most people get stuck in their heads. So I'm thanking you for showing up today, because I'm hoping that you came here opening your heart, and we have to take the pain of heartbreak to deal with the reparations of our community. So thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Chucho.
I would just echo that, just like a lot of hope and a lot of love, and then just a reminder that I need to be around people like y'all more. I need to be listening to these powerful words, and yeah, just spending more time with y'all. And I miss a lot of you. So
Right on. Thank you, Chucho. Belen and Sarah, y'all want to give us any thoughts about what we're doing next here?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And thank you, Ashanti, Ana, Chucho, for this great conversation. We'll be continuing this conversation tomorrow beginning at 9 a.m. We'll go from 9 a.m. to noon. We'll talk about the indigenous perspective of masculinity. Chucho will join us for that conversation, as well as Panelists. We'll also talk about intergenerational masculinity. April Ignacio, Bill Del Rosa, Emilia Fragoso will join us for that discussion. And then we'll talk about masculinity in Black, gender norms, and anti-Blackness. Dr. Damon Holt will join us for that conversation. So we're going to be using the same Zoom link tomorrow from 9 to noon. And then on Wednesday, we'll continue our discussions around systems and how they punish and harm young men. Anna will be joining us for that conversation. And then we're going to get to some work and start to develop some strategies on how we move forward and improve outcomes for young men and masculine identified youth in Tucson. So we look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow morning. Michael, is there anything else you want to say?
Just a big thank you. Thank you to everybody. What a beautiful night. I'm really grateful, really excited about what we're going to do over the next few days. Send any other questions that you come up. and we'll get responses to them, and we'll share them out with everybody. Thank y'all so much. I hope I see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Chucho. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Belen and Sarah. See you all soon. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.